Hello, everyone, and welcome to another America's SAP Users Group Partner Webcast. My name is Maureen McInerney, Partner Marketing Specialist here at ASUG, and I'll be your moderator for this event. I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us for this presentation. Today's webcast is being recorded. The link to the recording and the accompanying slides will be posted to the ASUG website, and all registrants will receive an email with the link to those materials. I'd like to remind our audience members that you can submit your questions at any time by clicking the purple Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Today's webcast is what you should know about Material Ledger in S/4HANA. Our speakers today are Rogério Faleiros and Paul Ovigele. And now I'll hand it over to our speaker, Paul.
Thanks, Maureen. Thanks, everyone, for attending this webcast. As Maureen said, my name is Paul Ovigele. I'll take you through the next 10 slides, and then I'll hand it over to Rogério, and I'll be back for the Q&A. So first of all, just an introduction to ERPfixers. We are a platform of thousands of experts that specialize in most of the SAP modules. We founded it to fill a gap in the industry, just to make sure the right skills were available to companies when they needed it and for short-term requests. If you want to know more about us, just visit our website on ERPfixers.com or contact us on info@ERPfixers.com. So the speakers, first we have Rogério Faleiros. He's an SAP consultant. He specializes in the controlling module. He's been working with IFRS and integration with product costing and material ledger, minimizing the impact of the changes in SAP for companies in different locations. Rogério is the author of Configuring Controlling in SAP ERP and Introducing the Material Ledger in S/4HANA. I've worked as an ERP financials consultant since '97 in both North America and Europe. I specialize in the FI and CO modules along with the integrated areas for companies in various industries. I'm the author of 100 Things You Should Know About Financial Accounting and Introducing the Material Ledger in S/4HANA. So, before we start, I'd like to have a poll just to see what situation the attendees are in right now. So could you, on your screen, select the option that relates to you? Or if you're on S/4HANA with Material Ledger, Parallel Currency and Valuation and Actual Costing, S/4HANA with Material Ledger, Parallel Valuation only, not on S/4HANA but use Material Ledger, or not on S/4HANA and do not use Material Ledger. So please go ahead and submit the option that applies to you, and in a few seconds, I will go to the next slide to see the results. Thank you. Okay, let's see. So we have 9% on S/4HANA with both parallel valuation, currencies, and actual costing. We have nobody in S/4HANA with parallel valuation only. That's interesting. We have, I guess, most people not on S/4HANA but use Material Ledger, and the other almost half is not in S/4HANA and do not use Material Ledger. So thank you very much for that. And we will tailor the conversation over the next 40 minutes to suit those who are the majority situation that we have in this webcast. So what is the SAP evolution with S/4HANA Material Ledger? So obviously, as everyone knows, SAP started in 1972 with the R1 release, and then in 79 went to R2. Around 92 went to R3. Looks like SAP has major changes every 10 years is what I see here. And then in 2000 went to MySAP, which also has, we came out with the ERP system in 2004. Actually, one important milestone, which is not here, is SAP introduced Material Ledger around 95, 96. Then in 2011, again, another 10 years after my SAP, introduced SAP HANA as a database. And then they put BW on HANA, put the business suite on HANA, and then went to SAP Simple Finance in 2014. And now, from 2015 onwards, it's S4HANA. So you might have heard so many different terms and labels that relate to HANA and S4HANA. The latest one is SAP S4HANA, and that's what this webcast will focus on. So taking the piece of that evolutionary path, which relates to HANA alone, HANA was introduced in 2011. So what did it do? You had accelerators, you had replication of tables, increase in performance for material ledger and other modules. Then BW on HANA, which obviously sped things up in the BW platform. ECC was on HANA. They also introduced some new transactions. Most of them have an H after it. Also increased the performance for the material ledger module. 2014 is when Simple Finance was introduced, which was subsequently called S4HANA Finance. This is where you have the Universal Journal, and SAP came up with a couple of functionalities which splits the cost of goods sold account, which is normally just one account, into its cost components, and also created variance categories by account. In 2015, you had obviously the Universal Journal with some improved functionalities, but then also Material Ledger's parallel valuation was introduced to S4HANA. So the next section is, what are the features of Material Ledger? When I talk to most people, or when most people ask me about Material Ledger, they assume Material Ledger is only about actual costing, right? And it's normally what people refer to when they talk about Material Ledger. Actual costing is really what is on their minds. And then also multiple currencies, people know about that as well. Multi-level reporting, meaning that any variances roll up the supply chain depending on where the product was used. But there's also functionality that is not really utilized in Material Ledger, which exists. Very few companies utilize this, but these are also things available with Material Ledger. And here are the examples: FIFO valuation, transfer pricing, net realizable value, price capping, removing the impact of foreign exchange, the impact of raw material price change on multi-level products, right? So meaning a raw material was consumed in another product, what happens to the variance of the raw material? Multiple accounting principles, US GAAP versus IFRS, dealing with those in parallel. And the two business functions, FIN, COGM, which is the cost of goods manufactured business function, which means you can have two actual activity prices based on two different types of GAAP valuation. Also log MMSIT, which deals with stock in transit and transfer pricing, intercompany markup. So there's a whole bunch of things, and even more, there's a question mark here, is even more with Material Ledger, which is being underutilized. And we'll talk about some of that in this webcast. Okay. So next, let's start talking about what Material Ledger functionality is available in SAP's latest release of S4HANA, which is 1709. So some of the questions we'll plan to answer here is, why is Material Ledger mandatory in S4HANA? What are the new Material Ledger tables? What are the technical changes in Material Ledger S4HANA 1709? Is actual costing mandatory? Can a company still use standard or moving average without performing Material Ledger transactions? What are the benefits of having Material Ledger activated? Is parallel valuation active in Material Ledger? And what are the additional features that you can get from Material Ledger in S4HANA? Right, so let's start with Material Ledger as being mandatory in S4HANA. So And this part I want to, before I hand over to Rogério, I just want to talk a little bit about this because there seems to be a lot of confusion here. So first of all, what is material ledger? Material ledger is really a sub-ledger of the general ledger. Just like accounts payable and accounts receivable and fixed assets are sub-ledgers, material ledger is also a sub-ledger, right? Now, as I said before, most people think of material ledger as actual costing. But that's actually pretty ironic because the actual costing piece of material ledger is an add-on to material ledger as a sub-ledger, right? Material, it's very similar to having an accounts receivable module, which is a sub-ledger, then having credit management on top of that. Accounts receivable is the sub-ledger. Credit management is kind of an add-on to the sub-ledger, which you can choose to use or not. Okay? So in fact, when you look in SAP menus, you normally see the term material ledger / actual costing, right? If actual costing was material ledger fully, it was what material ledger is, they wouldn't say material ledger / actual costing. Material ledger is a sub-ledger piece, which does parallel valuation, parallel currencies, and some of the other things that we'll discuss. Another thing to note is that for anyone that uses that has inventory in their system and uses that in SAP, you already have an inventory sub-ledger. It's called inventory management. Right? It contains several tables, normally disparate tables, and several reports that are needed to get the right data from that module. However, in that module, you can't get multiple currencies. It's only in one currency, which is the company code currency. It doesn't account for transfer pricing. It's also not very transparent. So what SAP did is try to improve this inventory management module. So they needed to have something similar to what they did in FI and CO with the Universal Journal. They needed to bring that to inventory management. So there were two choices. One is create a whole different model to do this, or secondly, leverage off something they already have. And they already had material ledger, right? And in fact, material ledger was kind of a duplicate of the inventory management module because you had data being posted to the inventory management module. And if you had material ledger, you have data being posted to material ledger, which is kind of the same. So they're now bringing this all into one cohesive universe, and that's what material ledger is doing. So they've improved on the inventory management module by leveraging off existing material ledger functionality. Okay, so that means that they've streamlined the process, so there's less tables doing more, right? So this is really what the material ledger sub-ledger in S/4HANA is doing. Think of it as a cohesive model that brings together the old inventory management, tables that you can see on the screen like MView, eView, and all of that, and also material ledger together so you can have parallel valuation, transfer pricing, all that stuff in your inventory management module. Okay, so now I'm going to hand over to Rogério, and Rogério will take you through the rest of most of this presentation, and I'll step in a couple of times then during the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everybody, for joining the webcast. It was a great presentation. In the beginning, when Paul mentioned all the advantages of using material ledger, and just going back to some points that it's, let's say, why some companies are using material ledger today and not even being in S/4HANA. So there are some countries that, let's say, it's by the law they need to report actual costing, and also the tool that SAP developed for this, it's material ledger. So if we think in S/4HANA that we have a simple model or simple, let's say, single truth of data that it's the Universal Journal, to keep doing, let's say, two different inventory models, like companies that are not using material ledger and companies that are using material ledger in the same way, it would be very hard. So that's the reason SAP migrated as well to just one model. And this process started, like Paul said, like in 2011 when the HANA database started, and then we could see that both of the main, let's say, modules in controlling SAP was changing a lot, like the accelerators and also the new model that is actually COPA, that we saw that COPA was changing a lot for performance, and also material ledger. At this point, we could realize that material ledger would turn very important tool in S4HANA or in SAP at the time, because we didn't have S4HANA. So the main idea is that we can understand now what's the biggest change. I mean, imagine we have one company or a big corporation that you have companies in different countries, and part of the companies they use material ledger, part they don't use material ledger. So even to the CFOs or even to the controllers to talk and to exchange experience or to exchange data, it's different because the inventory, the valuation model are different. So the system was bringing kind of disalignment between the business. So they need to understand. And sometimes if you start to talk with some companies, probably they would say, oh, they use material ledger there, I don't understand anything. So now with SAP moving to S4 and everybody needs to use, every company needs to use material ledger, I think it's a great opportunity that we or everybody are in the same page. That means what that means to have material ledger. It's not scary to have material ledger. Actually, we will see in this webcast that we have a lot of benefits when you use material ledger, like reporting, recurrence, different valuation method, and things like this. So what happened with the tables? We saw that I think 49% are still using material ledger, not HANA. So I believe that 50% of the people in the webcast, they are aware about the tables that we are talking about. That means material ledger itself is not easy to bring out the data in just one piece. That means there are several tables that bring the data that we need. So it's a header tables for quantity, tables for pricing, then also history, document table, and one of the biggest table we have, that's the actual cost component split. So the actual cost component split, it's mainly the table that SAP stores the actual data. Let's say you have the standard that you have the cost component, and the actual data split by cost component, it's stored in a table. This table is called CKML CAP and CKML CACO. And if we think like this is the big table that everybody says, I want to have a multiple CKM3 transaction for report. So you need to play around with this table. So what SAP did was to make it easier and also to have one single source. They put together several tables. So now we still have the header tables, okay? But now SAP put together some tables that it's the MKPF and MSEG that was for line items for material. Now it's together, it's combined. There are some tables that do not exist anymore. It's still like a view. So all the tables that we use, like MBU, AEW, all the stocking customers, stocking vendors, consignment, stocking sales order, history. Most of this table disappeared. So it's everything stored in the Universal Journal. So it builds the data. Of course, you can still access it, but now it's only one table. Also, there is a new table that combines most of the tables we have in material ledger. That's called MLDOC. So if you're used to have reports or on reports that you read different tables, you can get this information in just one table. There are two big advantages when we move to material ledger in S4HANA. Then you have the actual cost and actual cost component split activate. Is that all the information you have for movement now, it's stored in one table. So that means you can build your CKM3 for multiple material just extracting data from this table here. So it's there. Things that we didn't have before, like for who are using the classic or ERP material ledger, you can get this now. And there are some tables that I said that's still there, like where you can get the price or the split of cost component. And there are some tables that I don't know the reason SAP changed, but so the table that stores the cost and run, SAP changed the name from CKML V11 to this new one here. So that's the main let's say, big change in the material ledger structure. I know that's too technical, but if we look at SAP, it's merging the secondary tables to just one table. That goes again to the same data model, that is, we have Universal Journal table that is to concentrate all information that we need. So also this happens for material ledger and also for COPA in the Universal Journal. So what's the technical change we have in material ledger? Okay, we are talking about 1709 because when it moved to all the first version of S/4HANA, of course, in any big change you have some hiccups, and then the functionality is now coming back to what it is, of course, with a lot of new benefits. Okay, so when you have materials with V2, if you don't remember, for material ledger to be activated, you have to, of course, have a part that's called customize and a part that it's material master based. And the customized part of this is already on, turned on in 1709. So you need to handle all the master data. So if you have material now that it's what we call moving average, that it's V2 materials, that it's very familiar if you look in the finance view of the material master data, we don't have a table anymore to store this. So the data is built on fly. It's stored in the ACDOC table. So that means SAP is not storing data anymore for materials that, I mean, all this data is calculated on fly. Every time you have a goods receipt, you have a new price. So why would need a table for that? All the tables were made in this MLDOC, so we can get data from there. So what SAP suggests is, with the introduction of S4, of course, the old tables you can still access as a view. So you have, let's say, companies that they have custom reports developed, you can still use the reports because you still have a view to use. But SAP introduced some functions that make your life easier. So instead of doing SQL statement to read these views or to read the table, because we don't know what will happen in the future, if this view will still there in the next release. So start moving the own reports or the custom reports that you have today to the new functions that SAP has created. So it's functions to read data, functions to read document, and functions to read all the ML tables you need. So mainly you don't need to keep using the SQL in the database. You just use the SAP functions and then you can retrieve the data you need. A major change has happened in the currency valuation for material ledger, because in the new GL, if you have one ledger, you can have up to 3 currencies in the main ledger. Let's say like this: the new GL ledger, the main ledger have 3 currencies. And one of the customize of material ledger, what you can do is just replicate the 3 currencies I have in the main ledger to the material ledger itself. So that means the 3 currencies you have in new GL for the GL, it will move to the material ledger, so you have it automatically. Usually we call this the currency type 000. So if you start material ledger and use 000, that means you're bringing the currency from finance. The problem now is, or let's say kind of problem, SAP in the S/4HANA, you have much more option of currencies. So if I'm not wrong, the latest one was up to 8 or 9 currencies you could have in the Universal Journal entry. So if you try to use this customize, that means copy the currency from finance to material ledger, then it will fail because material ledger we can have only 3 currencies. So let's say for companies that are migrating from current material ledger or for S/4HANA, one of the points that they need to do is check and create your own currency. That can be the same currency you have today, but you cannot copy anymore the currency from finance and CO. This function has been deactivated. So that's the message you get from material ledger, that you cannot use this currency anymore. So it was, I mean, Paul mentioned very well, because when we talk about material ledger, it creates a confusion that says, now I have actual costing. And what we're saying is that you don't have actual cost until you activate actual cost. So we have two portions of customizing to be done. Okay, what is mandatory? Mandatory is to have the ledger, like the AP and AR. So the ledger itself is mandatory. So you don't need to dig data anymore in the material management tables. Now you have only one ledger to see, that it's the material ledger table. So if your company today, they're not using material ledger and you want to keep using the same structure that you have, and you don't want to use actual costing, nothing will happen to you. What you get is the ledger. You can still have your standard price without actual costing. You don't need to perform all the closing from material ledger. You can still run it the same way. But of course, you can also have the actual costing. So I used to say that now that you're having material ledger, why not activate the actual costing? Because all the beautiful part of the advantage of material ledger is to have the ledger itself plus the actual costing activated. So if we look here, we can see what it's green, that means it's mandatory. It's already with the system, that the 1709, you have this mandatory activated. So you cannot run a company without material ledger being activated. But you can have a company code, a plant, that you don't have the actual costing. Okay, and then we can see the benefits of having this or not. So this is the new material ledger settings that I just mentioned. So we have multiple currency in finance, and here's the place now. Now we have one place that SAP will tell the status of the material ledger customizing, meaning if it's green or not green, saying that's active or not active. So I don't need to go to several customizing anymore to see how the status of the material ledger is. In just one transaction, I see which valuation area is active, which company code, which currency type, if it's green, if material ledger is active, the type of actual costing, and things like this. So it combining the customizing also this, because before you had to do different transactions in the customizing. So it's really a game. Now we can see which currency or which customize you have for material ledger. So when you start in a new company. So while I was talking about what's the benefit of having material ledger or actual costing, meaning material ledger, it's on by default. Now, what happens if you have actual costing, turn it on or turn it off? Okay, that I said. If you're using material ledger, why not using the actual costing? So the main advantage of using the actual costing is that first you can calculate your moving average price based on all the difference you carry from the lower level, that means purchase price difference, to the upper level combined with semi-finished goods, production variance, and things like this. In a reporting perspective, you can still use the main reporting tool from SAP for material price analysis, that's CKM3. So if we check here, the upper part, it's an example for a company that they have material ledger active, but actual cost is not active. So they will have a really simple report that will tell goods entry, price, goods consumption, and end inventory. Just that. You cannot see actual cost and actual cost component split, what is your actual cost variance, and things like that. On the other hand, if you have the material ledger and actual cost activate, the CKM3 will change. And then you have the multi-level view. You can see from the time you purchased the material and the time you sold the finished good, the value flow of this. Okay, not only value flow, but the material quantities, you can trace and track everything. That's the benefit of using actual costing. So mainly what happens, I mentioned to you that several companies, they are already scared when we talk about migration, what's the impact of moving to S4HANA, and of course material ledger, it's the top trend now. So when I said you don't need really to keep using the actual cost, or you can do what you still do in your company, that means it's just a customizing that you need to do. That means if you have a material ledger, as I said, you have two portions of to activate material ledger. One is customized, another one is master data. In the master data, to keep, let's say, if you have a company that only have a standard price as a costing method or costing valuation, and they don't have multi-level costing, you can still have in S/4HANA. So you just set up this material as S2, okay, and then all the valuation will happen as a standard. So this is one example of difference of having material ledger, not material ledger actual costing turned on multi-level. So when, let's say I have a standard price of 10 and I purchased this material for 12 in period 1, okay? When I purchase it, of course I have an accounts payable of 12, and SAP will automatically release the price difference. So you don't have a way to observe this to stock anymore. So stock is flat, always evaluated as a standard, and this price difference is recorded in the P&L in the time it happened. So that means if you're a trading company, let's say you purchase and sell at the same time, and you have a price difference, and this month you don't sell anything, you recorded the loss without a revenue and without a COGS. On the other hand, material ledger with actual cost bring this to inventory to the time frame that you use this product, you release this. So let's say if you have material ledger and you bring this to stock and you don't sell it, you take the portion back of the price adjustment and move to stock, and you release this only in the time you sell or you produce a semi-finished good. So the material ledger itself, it's bringing the release of the price difference or also the production variance to the time exactly you sell the product. Okay, so that's the benefit, that you bring the variance to the time that it really happened, the release. Okay. At the end, of course, if you compare at the end of the year the inventory and then you do NRV, probably both methods will achieve the same value. But you have one that does this automatically. And I think this is the major part that creates confusion for most of the companies. What is the value that keep bouncing from period 1 to period 2, period 3, period 4 from material ledger? So mainly in a few words, what material ledger actual cost is doing is it holds the price difference until you use the material or until you sell the material and release at this moment. If you're using material ledger, there are a lot of questions that just came after. Which functionalities are still there? What can I use? Okay, so the possibilities in S/4HANA. So we just did the board here to explain if you have actual costing, what you can achieve, what you can get, and not. And with material ledger and in the version 16. The latest version, not 1709, the 1610, SAP brought back some functionalities from the ERP itself. Okay, and one of the functionalities is the business function, the transfer of the cost component split. I will hand it to Paul, that he mentioned a little bit more about this functionality because he's one of the most expert people in the world related to this. So, Paul, if you can also briefly explain about the log MMSIT, please.
Okay. Yes, definitely. This log MMSIT, I think, is a nice bridge between the actual costing functionality of material ledger and the parallel valuation functionality. When I started implementing material ledger, companies either wanted it for actual costing or they wanted it for parallel valuation. But this functionality brings it together. So I'll mention 3 functionalities that log MMSIT satisfies. And by the way, log MMSIT is just a business function that's activated when you're on the right release of SAP. It's actually available right now in the ECC system, but it's even more enhanced in S/4HANA. So one of the functionalities for log MMSIT is it gives you the ability to transfer. When you sell from one company to another, the receiving company can see the breakout of costs from the selling company. So that's the second, the third and fourth boxes you see here is what you get with log MMSIT. If you didn't have log MMSIT, you'd normally get the first 2 boxes, which is even though the 2 company codes are within the same client, the receiving company code only sees the total cost as a as one collapsed amount in the material cost component. So just like when you buy from a vendor, you know, if a vendor has a product which cost $100 and 50 was material, 30 was labor, 20 was overhead. When the vendor sells it to you, you just get $100 in a material bucket, right? But if two companies are in the same client and the same controlling area with material ledger activated, the receiving company can see that same breakout. They can see that same breakout, and so that's a good advantage of it. But then the second advantage is they can also see any intercompany markup that was charged by the selling company. So one of the pain points that I have heard from customers over the years is how do we track profit in inventory? You know, there's so many manual processes being used. Material ledger is the answer to that. It's the only answer to that in SAP, the most automated answer. And so what happens is in the receiving company, that intercompany profit is tracked in a special cost component split. And if that company sells it to yet another company, the SAP keeps tracking that intercompany profit. So that's the second benefit. Then the third one is it also allows you to record stock in transit. So if company A sold to company B, but when company A did the goods issue, it took 2 weeks, it was on the ocean, and it didn't get to company B, and the title transfer rules say that when company A ships it, it still belongs to company A until a certain point in time, or it belongs to company B at some exchange point. You can actually track all that, not just in logistics, which is somewhat possible now, but also in accounting using this functionality, this log MMSIT functionality. Just one more thing to say about log MMSIT. As Rogério is saying, if you go to S/4HANA, you might choose to use parallel valuation and parallel currencies without using actual costing. This log MMSIT will still work. Everything I said will still work, with the only difference being that those values that you see would be at standard and not actual, but you'll still record the intercompany profits. You'll see it throughout the supply chain. You will see transparent cost components. You'll also see the recorded accounting and logistics stock in transit across the supply chain. Okay, so I'll hand it back to Rogério to take you through the rest of the webcast.
Thank you, Paul. So going back to what S/4HANA brought is, of course, we have to tell what it's the good points that we have here. And the simplification of the database or the model, it's one of the greatest advantage we have. Now that we can retrieve the data from few different tables only, we don't need to really build a really difficult coding to get the data. And one of the big changes, if you look now to CKM3, that is the material price analysis, it's also changed a lot. Okay, so what is the big change? You cannot choose anymore the cost component view. Let's say before you have to choose between price history or standard valuation, things like this, and the cost component view. Now the cost component view, it's embedded in the screen, so you can have the cost component now in the screen itself. So you don't need really to keep changing the view to see what you want. No, it's there. And there is another point that is this tick here called display all cost component. So if you don't tick this, SAP will read the OKTZ only what its inventory relevant cost component. And if you tick here, SAP will show everything. So all the statistical cost components you have, you can show here as well. Okay, so it's a big benefit because you had this before in CK13N where you had to choose the view, which view you're using. But now it's also here, so you can have the statistical cost component in just one screen. So it's a big benefit as well. And also the transaction itself, it's much simple to use. You can still retrieve, let's say, when you do the conversion from to S4, SAP will, let's say, do a conversion of almost 1 year of data. Okay, so you can still use the new CKM3 for 1 year of data. All the data that you want to reach prior to this, you have to use the CKM3 old. That means it's to read the old data, so you don't lose what you had in the past. Just that the data, let's say, if you have 10 years of SAP and Material Ledger running, part of the data will not be converted to the new table because it's still there and you can still reach, just that it's useless to convert. So the CKM3, it's changed, and also you see that part of the flags that you had before, like price single level calculated, multi-level calculated, with revaluation consumption calculated. This has changed because the model of the closing process will also change. I will show later. So we don't have all these steps anymore in the closing process. So this is a big advantage as well. So that's the benefit of having material ledger and actual costing. What you can get: actual costing, actual cost component split, multiple valuation, meaning currency and parallel. It's very important to tell because if we look what Paul mentioned in the beginning, the top of the iceberg, and a lot of companies, they make some confusion when we say parallel valuation, currency valuation. So SAP says you can have up to 3 currency valuation, but you have also the opportunity to have parallel valuation. That means you can have a group costing or group valuation, as Paul mentioned, or even 2 activity types, actual activity types. That means you can have, for example, if you have a different valuation method for depreciation, you can have 2 material ledgers or 2 valuations, one to bring the actual from the local ledger, another one to bring the valuation for depreciation from a second ledger. So that's what we call parallel valuation. So it's mixed. I mean, company will, if you look at, we are not talking about only 3 currencies, but we are talking about a parallel valuation. For reporting purpose, we still use the CKM3. That is the main transaction we have for material ledger. Not a lot of companies that they use material ledger, they use KKML0. But KKML0, it's a drill down reporting for material ledger. It's the same functionality you have for COPA. It's there since 4.7, but I still don't know the reason. It was not really very used and not very published by SAP. But what you do, you create forms and reports, and then you can have a CKM3 in a multiple ways. Okay, so let's say for several materials at the same time. The only disadvantage of this transaction is that only use the standard without enhancement, you cannot get the actual cost component split. To solve this issue, SAP brought the virtual info provider. Okay, so far the 1709 you cannot get in KKML0 the actual cost component split. You need to do some enhancement to get this. Okay. So when you use S4 or even classic ERP system, you can still using what SAP calls FCML tables. That means you don't, if you use KKML0, the reporting tool for drill down reporting, we don't have a SAP, they don't have a table that they read automatically like COPA, that they have costing based. I mean, that they have the table and then extract the report from a total or from an item table. So what SAP brought with HANA database, not S4HANA, was the possibility to feed some tables internally that would speed up the process of reading data. That is, every time you have a movement, these tables, that's called FCML, and then data by month, data by cost component, it's there. So you can also extract data there. And it's very simple to activate. So you can use this even in ECC. You don't need to be in S4. And then this bring, let's say, a better performance in KKML0. When you turn on this functionality, this transaction, HDBC, it automatically flips the program, the KKML, from where it retrieves the data. So or it takes from the new tables or it takes from the memory. Okay, so if you're in ECC, you can still use, and then you have the KKML0 faster. So before the 1610, one of the main issue the companies had, so let's say in HP, I think ECC HP 5, SAP released what they call the COGM functionality. And the COGM functionality to work, you need to have the evaluation profile, okay? And this functionality was not working until 16.10 release 2, if I'm not wrong. So SAP brought back this. So now the companies that they use ECC and they have COGM functionality active, they can migrate without a gap, without a problem. Okay, so it's not anymore a problem to migrate from ECC to S4HANA if you are in a higher version. The transfer price is also available. It's a little bit more complex to set up, but you can still use the old and the new methods. Okay, so let's say all the benefits or all the functionality so far we had for the main material ledger in ECC, it's available in S4HANA. There is one big, let's say, good functionality that the split of COGS into account. So when SAP moved to Simple Finance and then S4 and now S4 1709, we saw that the accounting posting was the most important point now. So it's trying to flip and also flip from costing-based COPA to account-based COPA. What was the main difficult or companies they did not use the account-based so a lot in the past? Because they didn't have the possibility to have the cost component split in accounting. So they had to use the costing base so they could see this. Now SAP in S4HANA, you have this possibility. So what you do, you map the source account and the cost component, and it automatically posts the cost component split breaking down by account. So let's say you create a management account, it clears the COGS account and we post back to the COGS account. So it's a very powerful tool, and now it goes and it closes the gap. That means now I have cost component split in accounting side. The same thing happened with variance. So variance and cost component split, you could have only in account-based, in cost-based COPA. That means that when you settle the production variance, you map the account and to a group of value fields, you could see if it's material, price, quantity, and things like this. Now in S4HANA, you can also do this and define the how you want to see. SAP again will split the settlement of variance of production order in different accounts. So you can see everything in the reporting. So what happened with CKMLCP? Okay, it's the same transaction now for alternative valuation one, that's the second material ledger, and the main material ledger. You just choose the type of material ledger you want to do. Everything was combined in just one line. Okay, that's called settlement. So you don't have any more single level, multi-level, revaluation of consumption. Everything just happened in just one step. And then you have the posting close. So just to compare, that was the difference between both, the old one and the new one. We don't have a lot of steps anymore, so it's simple. The main advantage now that we have some keys that are not used anymore. And now there is a new key for price difference. That means if you evaluate your activity rate in material ledger, that means your cost center is cleared by the difference of actual activity rate. In the past, you have only one account, and this account would clear everything, and you could not have the detail of which activity type was, the price difference of activity type. Now there is a new key for posting that we can get this. So you can also get the variance of activity types actual in your cost center. So you have the standard consumption of activity types plus the variance of activity types, let's say labor, machine, and things like that. When we go to migration, the migration cockpit, it's very simple. We don't have a lot of steps, but the steps prior to this, it's what do we say? It's important. That means it suggests that you do a kind of archiving before, because it's cost saving. You're paying for a database on If you reduce your database size, of course you pay less money. And the companies that are planning soon to migrate to S4 to not have two big changes in just one moment. That means S4HANA plus Material Ledger. We have as a suggestion that first migrate Material Ledger, understand how it works, get used to this, then go to S4HANA, that you get the knowledge from them. There are some changes in the Material Ledger Help Desk that prior to 1610, you could still use the CKM help. Now you have to use this transaction here, but it's still locked to SAP only. So that means any user cannot use. You need always to open an OSS note and then a service in SAP, and then they fix the Material Ledger if there is an error. Another good advantage or change that SAP brought is that for the companies that they use Material Ledger, it's very common when you're closing Material Ledger, you get some error saying the material, it's locked by user A, B, or C, and then you cannot proceed with the Material Ledger closing. So there is a note that we deactivate the statistical moving average calculation. That means every time you have a move, SAP tries to calculate, even if it's done.
Sorry about this. I think we might be having some issues with Rogerio's sound connection. So we only have one more slide, so I'll just take that and through to the rest of the session. So the last slide that's showing right now is just the change in the Material Ledger Help Desk, which is a note that you download to give you some features where you can run programs that will deal with Material Ledger errors. And this slide is just showing the difference between the ECC Material Ledger Help Desk and the new Material Ledger Help Desk with S4HANA. Okay, so to summarize this session, we've learned the primary differences between Material Ledger and ECC and S4HANA 1709, understood the benefits, possibilities, and weaknesses of ML in S4HANA 1709. We have an overview. We've shown an overview of some of the reports. A lot of this information and much more is available in Rogério and myself's upcoming book, which is Introducing Material Ledger in S4HANA. It's actually coming out in, I think, a month's time. And one of the slides we have has if you want to pre-order and get a discount and all of that, we have a slide for that. Also, just by the way, we've had so many questions come in while this webcast was going on, and we definitely can't answer all the questions. But what we normally do for anyone who's attended our webcast is that we will answer the questions. Every single question that's coming will be answered, and in the email we send to you after this webcast, we'll have all the answers there as well. So don't worry about that. We don't get to your question. Also, there's a lot of material, there's a lot of information, and a lot of misconception as well about Material Ledger and S4HANA, and it's hard to satisfy in one session. We have another webcast next month with Janet Salmon. Janet is she manages the team in SAP that comes out, that develops all this material ledger stuff. So I thought she's really a repository of the information, and she'll be a very good one to bounce any questions about the latest version of HANA and any other questions that you have about this. So we'll now go to the question section. We don't have too much time, but we'll use the next few minutes to answer some questions. And like I said, we'll answer anything we can answer now. We'll send the answers in subsequently to everybody. So I'll pass it over to Maureen to ask any questions that have come up.
Thank you, Paul. As you said, we're moving on to the question and answer. So feel free to continue to let those questions come in. As Paul mentioned, we will get to all of them, even if it's not answered on the webcast. So first question, is it mandatory to activate ML if I don't have it in my company?
So that's actually a simple answer, and the answer is if you're going to S4HANA, it is mandatory to. Material ledger activation is actually part of the conversion to S4HANA. So it is mandatory. I would just say another thing about this because, when people are asking me about, material ledger is now mandatory, we never had it before, they talk about it like some burden. This is something, we just want to go to S4HANA. Now you're giving us material ledger. It is actually, hopefully from what you've heard with Rogério today, there's a lot of functionality in material ledger that you're probably doing manually right now. So the answer is yes, you need to go on, but I think you should look at this as an opportunity to try to leverage off some of this functionality, which will help you in your business, help you with decision making, with reporting, and everything else. So the answer is yes, but it's a good thing.
Okay. Can we have material ledger activate for variant material? Variant configuration active?
Definitely. So
yes,
if you have, I'm sorry, go on, Rogério.
No, it's okay. I mean, because this is also the same scenario several companies they have today, that you can have configurable material in the sales order, and SAP will calculate the material ledger. The main advantage that you have the valuation by object, or by sales order item itself. So all the variance will go to the sales order item if you have stock on the sales order item. Or if you don't have, then yes, no problem. It's still the same, and you have the variance of production, everything allocated to the correct place.
Next question. Are the MBEW, EBEW tables going to be maintained as views in S4HANA, or are they deleted?
Yes, there's still views. You can, if you have customers report that use the views, you can still use it. So it's still present. The benefit of SAP is that they brought all the old tables that they're not used anymore. They still have as a view. So you still have this. You can reach data from there.
Another question. So any MB type transaction where a BDC is used will need to be reworked, then correct?
Yes, because let's say if you're still using BDC, I think the best approach would change this to BAPI to post already, because if you do any change in the screen and things like this, you already have an issue. Yes, all the BDC or the MB transaction just moved to Migo. So it's only one transaction for everything. So you need to review the BDCs as well.
Another question. We are on SAP ECC 6.0 on HANA with material ledger and split valuation active. Anything we need to worry about?
I would say that the split valuation already. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, please.
Go on, please.
Go ahead. I would say that split valuation itself it's already. Please go ahead, Paul. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. I was going to say, if you had split valuation, obviously had its nuances, its own nuances, but from my experience, that you shouldn't have a problem with split valuation going onto S4HANA.
It looks like we have time for one more. Are the old ML tables, MLHD, MLIT, CKMLPP maintained as views so that the old programs and AMP reports still work in S4HANA?
Yes, you can still reach as a view, but the suggestion also from SAP is to flip the way you read the data, not going like SQL selecting the data itself in the views, but using the function that it's available now to retrieve the data. That it's the three of the functions we showed in the presentation. Of course, there are more, but the goal is that to change for that this is, I mean, it's standard. If something happening with the views later, your programs are okay.
Okay, final question. We are moving to HEC first just to get to a more current platform than our old ECC6. Will an upgrade of Material Ledger come along with that?
If I understood the question, you're moving to HANA ECC. You don't need, if it's on ECC, the Material Ledger is not mandatory. It's just when you move to S4 HANA. ECC only on HANA database, no change from ECC in a different database itself.
Yeah, and I think just looking at that question, I'm thinking the question is on moving to HEC, which is HANA Enterprise Cloud, and just to get from a database point of view, and the question is, with the HANA Enterprise Cloud, would Material Ledger upgrade come with that? But the answer is no, because if you're just on the database and not using S4HANA, you wouldn't get those suite of functionalities we've been talking about. You're just getting the new, faster database, but not, obviously Material Ledger will run faster, but some of the stuff we've talked about today will not be available until you move to S4.
We have another question. We use FIFO calculation, and is there any step we need to take during migration?
I mean, it all depends on how you use FIFO calculation for Material Ledger, because even for Material Ledger, there is an old process to run that it's using the MYR2 and things like this, or if you use the new process. The only thing I would say is that if you're in ECC like HP6, HP5, and you're using FIFO just to migrate the new to the new transaction, then no big change. If you have FIFO, then it's still the account principal associated to the FIFO evaluation, and it's still in the Material Ledger. It will read in the same way.
All right, thank you, Rogério. I'll hand it back over to you guys for any final comments.
Yeah, thank you very much, Maureen and Rogério. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. I hope this session was useful. As you can see, there's a lot of information. There's a lot of questions. We have I have on the slide the book that's going to be coming out next month, or I think here in March. So you can pre-order if you want to get more information in S4HANA. We're also doing several things to spread the word and share knowledge on some of this new functionality, because I know that there's a lot of information, and now that everybody has to be on it when they're in S4HANA, there's also a lot of questions. So also look out for the webcast with Janet next month. I think that'll be pretty useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Rogério and Paul, for a great webcast. On behalf of America's SAP Users Group, I'd like to thank ERPfixers as well as all of you who took the time out today to attend the webcast. This recording and slides from today's program will be posted to the ASUG website, and all registrants will receive an email with the link to those materials. With that, I'd like to close today's webcast. Have a wonderful day, everyone.